It is actually a joy to join together again with each and every one of you this beautiful morning. And I am very happy to say that I always look forward to join you in the Sunday session, as well as also I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the new incoming BUBS committee who have been elected in the last AGM. And I share your joy in sharing and in working for the Sasana. And indeed, this is a very wonderful effort and also contribution. And you rejoice in what you do, and also looking forward to working closely with each one of you. All right. Now, today's session is on a very relevant topic, in the sense that in this current world itself, there is a lot of conflicts and contradictions between science and religion. So I would like to share some of my views, as well as also what is stated in the scriptures. And basically, the topic today is called "Science Without Religion is Lame, and Religion Without Science is Blind." Right? Now, this quotation is actually given by Albert Einstein, who is one of the most foremost physicists and scientists. And it is him who has actually said that the religion of the future is actually none other than our very own Buddha Dhamma, right? And it is a fact that Buddhism and science has always been very compatible. And whenever we talk about science, now if we do not couple it with the beliefs and religions, then it is going to be very lame knowledge. But of course, when religion did not couple up with science, then you are actually moving around in the dark. You are as if like in a blind state. So it is important that we try to understand what is science. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, just now it was unmuted. It was muted, is it?
Yes.
Oh, my apologies. All right.
No worries. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Now, I was trying to present this topic on the science without religion is lame, in the sense that when you understand what is science, but you do not couple with the understanding of what is the religious principles and also the teachings of the heart, then it is actually a lame knowledge itself. But when we talk about religion without science, then you are actually not backed up by what is the reality in truth. And at the same time, we would then be sort of moving around in a very blank state. Now, I think in the past, many years, science has actually, when it was first introduced in the world of religion, there were a lot of uncompromising attitudes and uncompromising treatments of the scientists who have prevailed during those previous times. Now, I think one of the most famous one is Galileo, right? Now, Galileo actually said that the sun is the center of the solar system, and that our Earth revolves around the sun. But in the early days, when we were learning about religion, it was actually said that the sun revolves around the Earth. So when Galileo tried to present that theory and that truth itself, he was very badly persecuted. And Copernicus is also one of those scientists who has worked on this idea in secret to escape persecution. And all this, together with Johannes Kepler, all of them have actually come to a conclusion that what was taught during at that period of time on religion has actually very little basis on science. And therefore, when they try to correct them and when they try to prove them, they were all very badly persecuted. So you can see how religion has progressed in the past. And it's actually a very sad fact that even until today, you will still have some religionists who have actually disproved science and saying that it is actually knowledge which should not be taught and not encouraged. Now, when we talk about science, you'll notice that we had this concept called beginning, right? But in science, there is no beginning. Whereas when you go into religion, then religion talks about that in the beginning, something has happened. In the beginning, the universe was created, the earth was created, life was created. So there is this creation theory at the point in the beginning. But when we come to science, there is actually no concept called the beginning. Now, there are many times when we are being brought up and says, where are you from? That we actually trace ourselves back and says that, oh, we came from our parents. Where did our parents come from? Our grandparents. Then when we talk about our grandparents, then you go back to great-great-grandparents and then so on until finally we were all created from an omnipotent entity, which then creates the universe and thus put us here. And thus we are here to serve, we are here to fulfill that vision and the wish of the omnipotent entity. But when we talk about beginning, we are actually talking about time and space. Now remember this, that when you say in the beginning, you are saying that at a particular point in time and a particular point in space, something happened. Now, when we talk about time, there's this concept called infinity. And same thing with space. Because when we talk about time and space, it's infinite. There is actually no beginning, neither is there an end. It continues and continues. And thus there is, when you say in a particular point in time and a particular point in space, then we are actually dealing with infinity. So what was before that particular point in time and space? What happens? And then you have to trace back again and it will never end. In fact, we all understand that when we talk about time and space, it is as if like it is a circle. And it is true that we talk about time and we talk about space. It's always a relevant theory. Relevant theory means when you talk about this particular point, in relevant to this particular point, then between this period is called 1 hour. Or between this period is called 1 day. Or between this period is called 1 month and 1 year. And when we talk about a particular point in space, then between this point to this point, that is the distance. And that is the separation. And that is also what we call the space that is in between. So when we do go into this concept, then religion actually disproves the theory of in the beginning. So what does our Dhamma teach us? Now we always learn in the Buddha's teachings that every phenomena is actually a circle. And where is that particular point of beginning and time in that circle itself? Imagine that that circle is a space. So you say, you point at a particular point in that circle. Is that the beginning or is that the end of the circle? Because the beginning is the end and the end is also the beginning. So everything revolves around a circle. And that's why sometimes when we talk about universe and we talk about outer space, if we were to shine a point in light into space, actually that light goes on and on and on and on and on, and eventually it will then come back to the point where it started. In other words, the light will then bend and come back to you. And these theories have been proven over and over again through the study of science. So when you have concepts of time and space, we all must know that this is infinite. It will go on and on and on until you put a, what you call a particular point. And that particular point, as we say, is the beginning. And that particular point is also the ending. So same thing likewise, when we say that we are being born, birth is the beginning of death. And death is the beginning of birth. And birth is the end of death. And death is the end of birth. So therefore, there is actually no, what you call firm point where we can say grasp it and that it must remain like this all the time. So understanding this concept, then we will understand the concept of anicca, anatta, and dukkha. Because there is nothing which is permanent and nothing which exists as a permanent entity. And thus, it keeps on changing, it keeps on revolving, it keeps on in a, what you call, cycle. So when we talk about science and religion, we must try to balance it, because science in its full secular knowledge can be very debilitating, because it can give us a lot of false sense of confidence and false sense of understanding. So sometimes we need to fall back on religion, where religion then takes care of what we call our conscience, our emotions, our feelings, and to a certain extent, some understanding which is not at the current level of being proved by science. Because science at the moment is still being discovered. It's still going into a very long journey of uncovering one by one, right? And as we learn more and more, sometimes we become too engrossed with this secular knowledge that we thought we know everything. But unfortunately, there is one part which science have very difficulty in trying to expound, and that is the workings of the mind. So when we talk about our human existence, we are not only talking about the science of a physical form, we are also talking about the conscience and the characteristics of a mind. So we have to balance these two. Otherwise, we will then feel very difficult. So since time immemorial, we have also argued that whether the Dhamma or the Buddha's teaching falls under the category of religion. So we have to now study this word called religion, which derives from two words. One is called re, and one is called ligo. Ligo means ligament. Ligament means joining together. So like, for example, your joints at your knee, your joints at your ankle, your joints at your elbow, they join two parts of the body. So when you say religion, it means that you are now trying to relink and rebind and reconnect with something. So if you study other religions, basically you were created pure, you were created in the, what do you call, in the perfect condition. But unfortunately, you have sinned. Unfortunately, you have erred and stray away from the purity of existence. And thus, as you stray, now you must learn how to relink it back with either the nature or with what we call the creator. So this relinking is a process and a thing where one human being will then have to involve himself, learn, rediscover, and finally enlighten yourself, and then to relink back. But in the Buddha's teaching, as we said earlier, we try to play down on the idea of creation, but we emphasize on the power of nature or the laws of nature. So basically what the Buddha for many years, have 45 years of ministry, has actually tried to teach us that we are all governed by the laws of nature and natural laws. And he wanted us to study and understand how nature works, the various processes, the various characteristics, the various behavior. And as we understand it more and more, we then tuned ourselves, we then moderate ourselves. And thus, we then calm ourselves and be peaceful once more. And once that happens, then we actually relink ourselves back to the natural state. Because at the moment now we are out of balance. We are what we call in conflict with nature. And as we are in conflict with nature, we stray away. And now we have to actually come back to nature. Take, for example, our mind. Our mind has been disturbed. Our mind has been disrupted. Our mind has actually created a lot of tension and stress, disagreements. And the only way to actually solve it is by calming it down, by understanding it in the right perspective, by understanding the truth about how nature works. And once we understand how nature works and the powers of nature, then we will tend to behave and live in harmony with it. And as we live in harmony, we then pacify ourselves, we then accept what nature has to offer. And finally, of course, then we relink back with nature. So from nature we come, to nature we return. So this word religion also applies to the Buddha Dhamma and the practice of the Buddha Dhamma, in the sense that we are trying to relink it back with what the Buddha expounded about the natural laws that has governed every characteristics and every phenomena that exist together with us. And once we are able to do that, then our mind becomes so pacified and so calm, so enlightened, that we no longer is disturbed. And with the non-attached and non-disturbed mind, that mind then doesn't attach itself to another birth. And thus, when there is no more birth, nir, no, varna, become. When there is no more become or no more birth, then there is no more old age, sickness, and death. And that is what we call how we resolve the major dukkha or suffering once and for all and attain nirvana with an enlightened mind, with a peaceful mind, with a very calm and understanding mind. So because they are not part of nature, then of course, supernatural entities cannot be investigated by science. What do you mean by this? Is that there are sometimes certain supernatural events which we can't understand. And sometimes it is the workings of the mind, sometimes it's the tricks of the mind, sometimes it is the stress that created all these supernatural entities. Thus, we say that when the Buddha points out that everything is governed by the laws of nature, in fact, there is no such phenomena called supernatural. In other words, he says that there is actually nothing called miracles, because miracles are basically a natural event as a result of some occurrence. As a result of some arising, there will be some resultant. So in this sense, science and religions at the moment now is separate, but we have to address it through the aspects of human understanding in different ways. So, but we must not attempt to put science and religion against each other to create controversy where you don't need it to exist. This is important. So science is important to help us understand the physical structure of the universe, where else religion deals with the human values, morals, and meanings. But both must be able to reconcile and assist each other in creating the right understanding, the understanding of physical structure of the universe, the forces of nature, while religion then deals with our human morals, our human values, and the meaning of life. And so it is a balance between the heart and the mind. Now remember, sometimes when we talk about learning the Buddha Dharma, there are some who say, oh, we must go in to really learn the teachings and the concept of the Buddha's teachings. And as we learn all the technicalities and all the theories and all the sutras, then we become too what we call secular in nature. We become intelligent. We have IQ. But unfortunately, when we meet with circumstances, tragedies, calamities, our mind then sinks into weakness. There are many people with PhD who are very good in science and very good in knowledge. But unfortunately, when it comes to problems of the hearts, they then took their own life. And it is not, wrong to think that a very intelligent person may not have the emotional quotient or the characteristics of the heart. So sometimes even in the Buddha's teachings, you notice that there should be a balance between the IQ and the EQ. So science talks about the IQ and religion talks about the EQ. So IQ and EQ must balance itself. Otherwise, we will then be what we call religion without science is blind and science without religion is lame. So in the what you call in the presentation of the Buddha's teaching, you'll notice that there are currently sometimes two schools of practice. One school is that you gain as much theories and knowledge. The other one is that you just practiced, or by experiential, or by what we call charity, compassion. And thus you then get two approaches, and they are not wrong. Each of them is trying to actually excel in either IQ or the EQ. But at the end of the day, we say we must have a overlap. And if we can overlap it, then we will then be balanced. So science investigates, but religion interprets. Science gives man knowledge, which is power, but religion gives man wisdom, which is control. So when you are very knowledgeable, you may not be wise. So therefore, wisdom comes from experience, wisdom comes from the emotion, and that you have to control. And the art of control lies in the cultivation and practice. So science deals mainly with facts. Religion deals mainly with values. Now the two are not rivals. They are actually complementary to each other. Now let's talk about the origin of the universe, because when we talk about science, somehow or other we have to eventually fall back and say, where did we come from? How were we created? And why are we here? What is the purpose? And when we ask ourselves this question, you find that a lot of answers by science and a lot of answers by religion, sometimes as they exist on their own, is not satisfactory answers. So let us now try to reconcile the both ends of the knowledge and see whether we can have a better understanding. Now, when we talk about the origin of the universe, we always say that, there was one particular point in time and space. Something happens. And some of us, we call this the Big Bang. The Big Bang means there is this big explosion of energy. And this explosion of energy spreads out across space. And as it spreads out across space and keep on expanding, it then creates what we call sparks. It then creates fusion. I think many of you who are science students, when we were in school, we did experiment with a machine. We call it the Van de Graaff machine. And there was this particular tube itself where we try to pump up the air and try to create the vacuum And as we expand the vacuum, that vacuum creates sparks within that tube. Exactly is the same as the Big Bang theory. That as the vacuum, we call it the vacuum, or the energy within that space, as it expands, it then creates sparks. And when it creates sparks, it creates fusion. When it creates fusion, it creates a lot of energy that is being interacting, vibrating, fusing, and thus creating a lot of energy, molten energy, what they call light. And when that happens, that is the beginning of the sun and the stars. And when the sun and the stars expanded further, it then throws off its molten energy, like, for example, some of the liquid energy, which then springs out from the sun, and this energy then starts to calm down and cool down. And when it starts to cool, and that is the time when all the physical form, mountains and sea, as the chemicals, as the chemical compound starts to recombine itself, then it forms water, it forms mountain, and it forms trees, and it then forms life, as life starts to become existing again. And as this then populates from a simple organism and slowly evolved and creates itself within itself, and thus create intelligent beings as they slowly evolved, and that we normally call it the evolution theory. And as human beings starts to exist, remember, there is this concept called impermanence. And there's this concept called the expansion, and then there will be a contraction. And when there is a contraction, there will be an expansion. It's like our heart, that our heart pumps in and our heart expands out. Pumps, expand, pump, expand. And thus, in the course of its pumping and expansion, you create what we call a motion. And this is called the wind elements. So as the universe expands, that is when the universal systems like solar, galaxies, and when they are being formed, slowly, when this energy starts to come down and cool, they then create what we call life. And that's how life started. But like all things, and like all impermanent phenomena, one day, when it reaches its limit of elasticity, it has become elastic, and then when it expands up to its limit, it will then start to contract. And as it starts to contract, that will be the collapse of energy. Now, energy will then become denser and denser, and as the energy becomes so dense that everything will then destroy itself and cease. And that is the end of one universe. And in the Buddha's teachings, we call it one kalpa. So one kalpa means one expansion and one contraction. And in that expansion and contraction, that is one universe. But when you have the end of one universe, the ending is the beginning of the next universe. Because as it expands until its limit, it will then start, as it contract until its limit, then it will start to expand again. That is the beginning of a new cycle, a beginning of a new day, the beginning of a new universe and a new kalpa. And thus, life then starts all over again. Now, of course, in religion, we call this one of the ending, the day when we end. So when we say that, well, there is no such thing called an ending. There will always be a expansion again and a beginning, and then it continues. The cycle keeps on going round and round. But why does this happen? Now, we all got to understand that when all this sun or stars, as they, what you call, cools down, as it pushed out some of this molten magma, it then creates what we call little planets and little moons, and thus creating what we call the solar systems. But one day, all this will then start to cool down again, and eventually it will destroy by itself. Then it gets joined back again, and the whole thing then repeats itself. But it all boils down to one concept called energy. Now remember, there was this energy that contracts and expands, which makes up what we call the universe. But what is energy? Now it's very important to understand that in science, we always say energy is neither created nor destroyed. There is no creation, neither is there a destruction. It is a mass of energy, which when it expands, it becomes less dense. But when it contracts, it becomes more dense. So it keeps on contracting and expanding, and thus creating what we call the motion of the universe. So when energy cannot be created nor destroyed, it can only be changed from one form to another. And I think even in the Buddha's teachings, we all learn that as we arise as a human being, this energy that combines us, the mind energy and the physical energy, it must have come from somewhere. It must have been some energy which has been transformed to this form. And after this form is completed, it can then be what we call ended up in another form. So there is what we call a transformation. That means energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only change from one form to another. So there is a transformation. And this is a theory given by Albert Einstein, which then talks about energy being in its various forms. At the end of the day, you are talking about sound energy, you are talking about electrical energy, you're talking about chemical energy, kinetic energy, and of course, you talk about light, you talk about heat, you talk about nuclear. And when all this energy combines itself, it actually can transform from one form to the other. Electrical can become sound. Sound can become kinetic. Kinetic then can actually create lights. And when you have light, then it can actually transform into heat. So it goes, as it moves around, it is still within that mass, but it is actually from one form to another. So when you do a lot of turning of a dynamo, that dynamo turns into electricity. And that electricity then lights up a light bulb. And so you see that the transformation then starts to happen all over. Now remember this. Albert Einstein says that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. You can only conserve or maintain. That's why he created what we call a formula called E equal mc squared. Now, E equal mc squared, sometimes we always like to joke about it and says E equals mong cha cha. Reason is because many of us don't understand how it works. But when we say E equal mc squared means this energy will, this mass of energy will always maintain what we call a constant form or conservation. But it then being transported, it then be transformed, it then being changed into the various characteristics and forms. So, as we all understand, energy is one big mass, and from that big mass is where we belong. And we are part of that mass of energy. That's why we are all interconnected. The reason why you can hear me is because my voice or the sound vibration that is created is then being received by a microphone. That microphone then converts it into electrical energy and finally pushed it as electromagnetic, travel across and eventually being received either through a fiber optic or either through a transmission or either through a wireless. And then it reaches your device, and then your device then converts this energy into a sound back again. And thus, you are now able to listen to me. But when we are able to do that, that shows that we are part of this mass of energy, and it is actually within this mass of energy that we are communicating. And that's why we are linked with each other. And that's why in the understanding of the Buddha's teaching, we are part and parcel of this universe, and the universe is within us. We can feel the universe, and we can see the universe as it happens outside. And that's why we always say that we don't have to go very far to learn about the characteristics of the universe. All we have to do is sit down quietly and observe the physical form, especially our breath. As we breathe in and out, we can actually feel the pulsating nature of the universe within us. And the characteristics of all the phenomena within this universe, within this understanding and notice of the breathing in and breathing out. Remember, when we are breathing in, we can feel the air going in, reaches our lungs. And as we breathe out, we can feel the air moving out through our nose, and then it goes out again, and then we absorb it back again, and we push it out again. But as we realize this nature, we realize that we cannot breathe in and then don't breathe out. Because you are going to have dukkha if you want to maintain that permanentness. Because you have to change from breathing in to breathing out, and change breathing out to breathing in. And that is a constant change. And once you can understand this, then you will then see anicca, impermanence. You will see that there's no permanent entity that you say don't change. If you want things don't change, you are going to be disappointed, dukkha. So anicca, impermanence, anatta, non-permanent entity, and when you are attached to a non-permanent entity, then you are going to have dukkha or unsatisfactoriness. So this is actually a very important realization. And when we realize that since we are part of this energy, let us then radiate kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and a lot of happiness. And we are connected with the rest. And through this connection and through this mass, we actually share the joys within the world. So these are some of the universal laws. And universal laws is very important for us, because once we understand the laws of nature or the universal laws, and we live in accordance with it and don't go against it, we will then be free from the consequences and the resultant of it. In other words, if you obey the laws of nature, you will not face the wrath of nature. And as we understand science again, we all then categorize it into the various subjects. We call it biology, we call it chemistry, we call it physics, we call it mathematics. But what we are actually trying to see and read is actually the various propoundation or the understanding of the characteristics of energy within biology, the energy itself within the chemistry, the energy itself within physics, and the energy that is created by the understanding of mathematics. In other words, we say biology explains how chemical process that makes life possible. Chemistry talks about using physics to explain how atoms and molecules bind together and react with each other. Because, like for example, H2O there are two molecules of hydrogen and one molecule of oxygen, thus creating what we call water. And then, of course, you have physics, which uses mathematics to explain how the various forces of nature react with each other. And that when we understand physics, we say that if there is no action, then there is no reaction. But that also is very widely known to us as the law of karma. And then mathematics is that when we understand the language of the universe, the algorithms, and when we understand algorithms, we then understand the mannerisms and the characteristics of people. That's why sometimes we say magicians, when they perform fantastic supernatural things, but actually they are not. They are just basically understanding the language of the universe and then exhibits it without our grasping. And at the end, if we don't grasp it, we then think that it is something magical. and it's something very supernatural. So what are the laws of the universe that the Buddha expound? It talks about the 5 cosmic laws. We call it the niyamas. Now, when we talk about niyama, it is actually the physical inorganic order. It talks about seasons. Seasons means when you have winter, it must be followed by spring. Then spring will then be followed by summer. Summer will then followed by autumn. And then you come back to winter again. And then the whole cycle repeats itself. So we all exist in cycles. For example, for 28 days, the moon will actually show its face full and new. You have new moon and then you have full moon. And for 365 days, you will then have what we call the earth revolving around the sun. And without fail, every 364 and a half day and a quarter day, you get the earth revolving around the sun, creating what we call a single year. And it keeps on going round and round. And of course, sometimes we then correct ourselves by putting what we call a leap year, by adding all the 1/4 of a year, 1/4 of a day together into one extra day, which is on the month of February, every 4 years. And cycles also happens in our lives. And I think a lot of people knows that when you experience these cycles, it happens very regularly. I think it happens even in physical form. Ladies would have understand this, that there is this cycle within them. And we also, as human beings, face many cycles. So this unfolds under the law of physical inorganic order, or niyama. Then there is another physical law, another law of order, which talks about physical organic order. Now this is called germinal order, which means to say, if you plant a mango seed, you get a mango tree. If you plant what we call a durian seed, you get a durian tree and bearing durian fruits. And if you want a human fetus, then you must have a pair of humans, a female and a male coming together, then creating a fetus, which is then born as a baby and then eventually grow up to be another human being. And germinal order occurs until we disturb it. And when we try to tamper with the laws of nature, sometimes we are smart enough to say, we want a mango that smells like durian. You can, by tempting with the genetical and also the germinal orders and the GM modifications. And when we tamper with it, we can create such outcome, but we have tempered with the forces of nature. Same thing with the physical inorganic order, when we temper with the laws of cycles, and when we temper with weather, when we temper with seasons, then we will have to face the wrath of it. Then we come to Karma Niyama. Karma Niyama talks about the law of action and result. That when we have an action, there will be an equal and opposite reaction. In other words, every time you apply a force, there must be some reaction coming back. So if you sow a good seed, you get good fruits. Sow a bad seed, you get bad fruits. It all falls under the same science. And that, as religion, we understand this science as that it is part and parcel of the characteristics of phenomena. So if you want to prevent or you want to avoid from bad results happening in your life, then don't sow bad seeds. And secondly, is don't provide the conditions that is conducive for that bad seed to germinate. And when the seed which has no right conditions or conducive condition, it remains a potential. And that potential will then continue until it finds the right condition later. And then it will germinate and take its form. So in other words, when we sow a seed, it may not necessarily result. So sometimes when we sow a lot of good seeds, then we say we have done so much good. But why is there no good results? Why are we not benefiting from it? The conditions are not right yet. The soil is not fertile yet. And thus that seed will always remain hibernating, waiting for the right conditions. That's why when we understand the Buddha's teachings, in order for us to benefit from the good actions that we have done, we must always maintain a good mind, a positive mind, and a happy mind. And these are conditions conducive for the karmic seeds within our mental stream to then take its form and arise to effect upon us. And thus, when the bad seeds will thrive in desperate conditions, in negative conditions, in unhappy conditions of the mind, when your mind is in that state of desperation and frustration and anger and unhappiness, then that condition is suitable for all the bad seeds to then take its form. So if you want good results, always maintain a good mind. If you want your bad seeds to germinate, then you keep a negative mind. So the choice is yours. So sometimes we always say that, when we create certain karmas, it may not necessarily result, provided we can control our minds and we can pacify our minds to create the right conditions for the good seeds to take its form. That's why we have this, what we call subject, called karma management, because karma can be managed, but you have to put in a lot of effort. Next one, of course, we want to come to the topic of chitta niyama, which is the order of the mind or the psychic laws. Now, order of the mind means the characteristics of our mind. And one of the strong characteristics of our mind is that we can only do one thing at one time. If we are happy, we are not unhappy. If we have unhappy thoughts, we don't have happy thoughts. We cannot have happy and unhappy thoughts at the same time. And that, of course, is called confusion and madness. So because of the characteristic of the mind, that gives us hope in life. That if we want to be happy, then don't have unhappy thoughts. Try to what we call suppressed unhappy thoughts. Promote good thoughts, promotes happy and positive thoughts. Then when your mind dwells in these good thoughts and happy thoughts, there is no chance for the unhappy thoughts to arise to disturb us. So chitta niyama is very important because, as we said, that if we want to control the karmic seeds within us, and we want good seeds to happen, then we must maintain a good mind. And if we can maintain a good mind, then we actually prevent the bad thoughts and the bad characteristics of the mind to arise. So the last law of order talks about Dhamma-inspired, which says that there is an order of the norm, that normal or what we call the normal things will happen when certain conditions are there. When you go out into the garden one fine morning, as you stretch your hand, you notice that your orchid, which has never bloomed before, suddenly has a what we call beautiful blossom. And you say, that is a good omen. That is a miracle. Or when a person is sick and eventually we give him all the confidence and that person then overcome and overwhelm his sickness. Then we say, that is a miracle by our prayers, by our chanting, by the what you call the actions, giving this person confidence, saddha. That person then overcome his sickness and become well again. And we call these miracles. And we call this supernatural. The Buddha says, no, this is the order of the what you call natural laws. The natural law says that when the conditions are there and you create the right conditions, certain things will happen. When the vibrations in the air is suitable, is peaceful, is calm, is happy vibrations, those seeds or those events that is waiting for these kind of conditions to prevail will then take its form. I always say that when you go to a desert, you see nothing grow because the conditions are not conducive. But once a while in the desert, it will rain. And when the rain comes and flood the plains, then you will see all life forms appears. the plants, the flowers, the trees blossom, and even animals, as they burrow deep in the ground in a very difficult situation or condition, it then starts to become what we call alive again. The frogs, the fishes, of course, they know that the season is very short. They then quickly reproduce themselves, burrow their eggs into the soil. And as the conditions rise up, the desert returns back to its form again. Then all this was quiet. But it doesn't mean there's no life in the desert. So in other words, when the conditions are available, life will then prevail. All the events will then take its form. So Dhamma talks about the order where if there is these conditions which is conducive, these events will take its form. So if we want to have good events, if we want to have positive events, then we must provide the positive environment. That's why we have this famous law which says the law of attractions. When you say your mind is positive, it will attract positive events. When your mind is negative, it will then attract negative events. So we have spoke a lot about energy. And basically, when we talk about energy, we must always refer to this life or this human body that we are in. What are we comprised of? We are comprised of two forms of energy. Many people ask, what is mind? We say no matter. And what is matter? Never mind. Because once you start to ask these questions, you will never be able to comprehend. But mind and matter, nama and rupa, are two forms of energy that combines together and react with each other, creating what we call a psychophysical being like you and me. We are a combination of two forms of energy. Mental energy, physical energy. Now, what is mental energy? Mental energy consists of the four faculties. And we call it the five aggregates. Part of the five aggregates has four faculties that relates to the mind, and one faculty relates to the physical form, the aggregates relating to the physical form. So the Buddha taught that the human being is made up of five aggregates, right? You have nama, which consists of consciousness. I'm conscious, I'm alive, right? And you then start to perceive. You then start to perceive and say, I recognize I am in a forum or a talk, and I recognize this person in front of me. Perception then starts to arise in the mind. Then you say, I feel good, I feel happy, I feel calm, I feel cool. Vedana or feelings then arise. And then, of course, finally, is the creativity of the mind, mental formation. Mental formation means you start to form thoughts. I like this person. I must go and visit him. I must send a gift to thank him. There, creation then takes place. Remember, when we do our Satipatthana, we are actually basing on this understanding. We have the understanding of consciousness, vijnana. Then we have what we call vedana. Then we have perception. And finally, of course, then we have cetana. Or vijnana, what you call having thoughts that create thoughts. But remember, when we talk about karma, when we are conscious, when we recognize, and when we feel good and happy, it does not create karma. But it is the last faculty of the mind, which is called cetana or intention. That you want to do something, intention, you want to think something, you say something. And that mental formation then creates karma. So when a person is alive, he has all these four. But when he passed away later on, he will then what we call loses his recognition, loses his feeling, loses his mental formations or thinking processes. And finally, of course, then the subconscious, the consciousness then becomes what we call subtle. And eventually it becomes a link to transfer it to the next what you call becoming or birth. And thus there is a relinking consciousness that moves on. Rupa talks about the body. And basically the body comprises of what we call the four elements. The four elements, which is earth, water, wind, and fire. Now, these are actually forms of energy, but we see in its form called earth. And earth means particles, molecules. And when we have these molecules and particles, like for example, you have potassium, you have magnesium, you have sodium. And when all these chemicals starts to combine and react with each other, it creates what we call wind. Wind means there is a lot of attraction and repulsion. You know, when you have two electromagnetic bodies knocking at each other, you create what we call expand, or what we call attraction and repulsion. Attracts and repulse, attracts and repulse. That's creating vibrations. And when these vibrations happen, it creates what we call wind. That's why our heart starts to pump, our blood starts to flow, and our breath starts to breathe, our lungs starts to absorb. And thus creating motion or wind. And when you have motion, then you create what we call a lot of heat. And when you create a lot of heat, you create what we call fire, earth, and then of course you have what you call wind, then we have fire. Now water comes about when you have earth, but earth doesn't bind itself if we do not have water. I give a simple example. When you have flour, flour tepung. When you put tepung on the table and then you blow it, does all the particles fly all over the place and you cannot have any formation. But when you add water to the flour and then you knead it, now the flour becomes dough because of the binding factor of water. And when this binding factor of water holds it together, you can then create form. You can create animals, you can create humans, you can create many formations. And when these particles are binded together, like I said earlier, it then starts to knock against each other because it is all electromagnetic. It then attracts, repels, thus creating motion. And then it creates what we call wind. And when the wind happens and knock against each other and fusion has happened, then you create what we call fire or heat. But when a person dies, what happens? The wind ceases because all this stops knocking. The heart stops pumping. The blood stops flowing. There is no more wind. When there's no more wind, then there is no more heat. And when there's no more heat, the body is then cold, stiffness and cold. And then the water now will start to dehydrate. And when the water dehydrates, the binding forces of it will then weaken and stops. And when it stops, the dust then releases itself. So we always say, from dust you come, to dust you return. So the Pancha Khandas, or the five aggregates, talks about the combination of nama, the four faculties of the mind, together with rupa, the physical form of earth, water, wind, and fire. And thus creating this combination, and thus creating what we call a live person, a person who is alive. For one fine day, like all impermanence, the rupa will then ceases and stops. And when it stops, all this will then return back. Water dehydrates, all the heat will disappear, disseminates and dissipates. Then earth then being released. And thus there is no more matter. But as I said, the mind then has this relinking attraction that again attracts itself to another rupa, and thus creating what we call another birth. And thus birth again takes its form. Death leads to birth, and birth then eventually leads to death. So as we live on, we then try to pacify this energy, control this energy within us. And as we practice generosity, as we practice a lot of renunciation, morality, efforts, and all this is basically religion. And that we call it the IQ of it, the emotional quotient that we use to control the state of our mind. And when we can control the state of our mind by using these perfections, then the mind calms down, the mind becomes conditioned. The mind then releases and understands, and thus do not get attached to phenomena anymore. And when the attachment or the craving started to cease, we call it that is the cessation of craving, cessation of attachment. And when we no longer attached, this mental energy which exists in an energy form cease to manifest as the mind, because the combination of it, which is held together, is actually called craving. It's like electricity, which is held together by what we call power, the amperes and the voltage. So if there is no more voltage, and if there is no more amperes, then there is no more electric current. And when there's no more electric current, then it doesn't light up another lamp. Which means, if this mental energy ceases to manifest without craving anymore, then it does not attach itself and light up another physical form or rupa. And that is the cessation of birth. Nirvana. So how to do that? We first have to practice the formula, the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths basically is a formula where we understand what is unsatisfactoriness, what is the dissatisfaction that we are facing. And the causes for all this dissatisfaction is that we must be attached to something which we don't want to change. We want everything to remain permanent as it is. We want to remain young, we want to remain healthy, and we want to remain alive. But unfortunately, all are subjected to change. And one day it will have to come to a reality of it. And so when you understand that if this is the cause for my attachment and for my unsatisfactoriness, what if I were to cease attaching? What if I were to cease the craving? And if you can cease craving, you cease the cause, you cease the cause, you cease dukkha. But semua ini senang cakap tapi susah buat. So therefore, we need to have a path, a marga, a way or a methodology to once and for all slowly cease from the attachment itself. So we have to train, and train through the 10 perfections, train through all the practice, and eventually we call it the Noble Eightfold Path. Right understanding, right thoughts, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, right speech, right action, right livelihood. Of course, sila, which forms the base, is very important for us later on then to progress into concentration or samadhi. Sometimes when the sila is weak, we have difficulty in having the right mindfulness and the right concentration. So, but once we can establish the base and we have the right cultivation, then arise in us panya, or wisdom. You understand reality as it truly are, and you have the right thoughts and the right positive minds. And with that, then you are then able to release your craving and attachment. And that will then lead to the cessation of dukkha. So in order, when we understand that we are practicing a religion, at the same time, we understand the science behind this, then know how to control both our physical and our mental energy. First, of course, you have to take care of this house, this physical form, understanding that it is actually a combination of the four, what we call elements, earth, water, wind, and make sure that it balances itself. Not too much fire, not too much wind, and not too much earth. And thus, we then can control what we call our health. Because in our understanding of the science of physical form, we know that if these four elements do not balance, when you have too much fire, then you get fever. When you have too much wind, then you get inflammation. When you have too much what we call earth, then you become obese and too much surface area to take care of. And thus, you will not be healthy. So in order to do that, in our Oriental philosophy or in our philosophy of treatment, we try to balance this up. And when all these elements are in balance, our body can actually heal by itself whatever sickness that will arise. And at the same time, we also need to take care of our mind. Mental energy has to be reinforced with creating the calmness and the positiveness. And that can only be done through meditation. And when we meditate, we actually learn the art of calmness. And as our body becomes calm, our body becomes relaxed. And with that relaxed body, we then focused onto our object of cultivation or meditation, which is actually breathing. And as we breathe in and out, it develops concentration. And once concentration sets in, then you create what we call a sense of bliss, a sense of calmness, a sense of happiness. And when we are in that state of calmness and peacefulness, we then observe phenomena through vipassana or through insight, and based on the understanding of consciousness, feelings, perception, and volitional thinking. That's why we base on these four bases, and understanding that our body is in this state. And as we breathe in and out, we can feel the sense of the body. And then we can feel the sense of calmness and peacefulness and free from pain. And as we feel what we call the mind being settled and all the thoughts, as we see the rising of the thoughts, and as we feel the development of the thoughts, and as we understand that when the thoughts comes, it doesn't remain all the time in its stable form. It will then change from one form to another. And as we understand the change, there arises in our mind the three characteristics. And these three characteristics is called anicca, anatta, dukkha. So meditation is also a science by itself, because as we learn to control the movements and the motion of our mind, we then develop good well-being. We reduces the pain. We reduces the feelings of depression and anxiety. We increases the blood flow. We provide a sense of calmness and balance. We help to reverse our physical form, especially our hearts. And we control our thoughts. We increase a positive energy, and lastly, of course, reduces stress, which is actually the main culprit behind a lot of our illness. And thus, when we have mindfulness, meditation, it helps to develop our mental health. And eventually, we will then be able to find joy, bliss, happiness, and love. And with that, I hope that you have benefited from this morning discussion. And if you have any questions, I will be very happy to assist in whatever form. Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Charlie. Yeah, we have a question here. So, does the law of Feng Shui exist within the Dharma from a Buddhist point of view?
Well, let's look at this word, Feng and Shui. Feng means wind. Shui means water. And do we know that all the forms that we experience, the physical forms, like the earth, like the mountains, like the sea, and the various features in the geography that we experienced, they are all created by the formations of wind and water. And so by understanding these various forms, it is highly important to understand the nature and the flow of energies. So Feng Shui actually is the study of the flow of energy, right? Geomancy means the study of the earth that we are in. And sometimes we say that if we want to have good environment for the nurturing of our health, It's good to go to the mountains and stay in the mountain to enjoy the fresh air, right? And after that, look out into the sea and enjoy the soothing nature of the calmness of the sea. And as we are able to calm down our mind, as we are able to give positiveness to our mind, as we are able to then develop a sense of peacefulness, isn't that a good conditions for the arising of our good karmas? Remember, we mentioned this, that our seed that we have sown in the soil, if there is no water, if there is no wind, if there's no sun, and if there's no nutrition, then that seed will always remain in the seed. Imagine planting a mango seed in the desert. Do you see a mango tree? But when the conditions are right, when the weather changes, and when the right temperature, when there is water, when there's nutrition, and when there's shade, that mango seed then says, this is the time for me to germinate and grow up into a mango tree and bear a lot of mango fruits. So karma, we all know that we have all generated over many lives through our intentions, through our cetana, or volitional thinking. We have created a lot of good karmas, we have collected a lot of bad karma. They are all seeds waiting with that potential. As long as you don't expand it, as long as you don't exhaust it, that potential remains there all the time. But we want good seeds to happen, isn't it? We don't want the bad seeds. We try to sort of prevent the bad seeds from germinating. You can do it, you can manage it by creating the right conditions. And when the right condition is there, the right opportunity is there, then that seed will then take its form and then arise to take its effect. So we have to understand geomancy in that manner, not in the superstitious forms and not in the supernatural form, because we all, as Buddhists, do not believe in supernatural events. It is all natural. It is part and parcel of the laws of nature. So when the conditions are there, the good omen would happen. Remember, I was talking to you the last time about the three, what we call the three cosmic trinity, we call it, or the cosmic trinity, or the three laks. Tian Cai, Di Cai, Ren Cai. Tian Cai is your karmic energies that you brought forward, because karma follows us life after life. So in other words, you are bestowed with certain good karmas, you are bestowed with also followed by certain bad karmas waiting for its eventual happening. But you must have what we call the Di Cai. Di Cai means the earth luck. What do you mean by earth luck? Means the environment that you are in, the conditions that you create for yourself, the opportunity that you avail. And if you have that right conditions and the right opportunity by staying in good environment, by experiencing good forces of nature, by aligning yourself with the forces of nature, then you will then be able to tap on the earth luck in order for your tian cai or your karmas to then happen. But you may have good tian cai and you also have good opportunity or good di cai, but unfortunately, 没有人才也是没有用. What do you mean by this? Is that you have not put in an effort to move into the direction to enjoy that good environment and to have tap that good karmic seeds that you have sown in your past. Remember this analogy of a person who go and see a fortune teller and the fortune teller says that, by 40th birthday, you are going to experience good luck. The sky is going to open and gold is going to fall down from the sky, all meant for you. Very happy, you waited for your 40th birthday. And on the 40th birthday, this man then go out, look into the sky, and true enough, the sky opened and gold fell down from the sky and landed in front of his house. He sat at the door, looked at the gold and says, if all this gold is meant for me, it will come into my house. Therefore, no need to worry about it. So he sat there and he waited. But all the gold fell on the road, which is public property. And as people passersby, they pick up some of the gold and then off they go, pick up some of the gold, off they go. And this man is still waiting at the door, says, gold, please come in because it's all meant for me. You have your tian cai, your karma has ripened. You have your ti cai because the condition has enabled your karma to ripen, but you didn't put an effort, the right effort to kick your butts, to go forward and pick the gold and bring it into your house. It will never happen. So therefore, you must have the right luck, tian cai, ti cai, ren cai. So same thing like this, when we understand the nature of the universe, we all understand that we are in a mass of energy. This energy sometimes can have very bad vibrations, very negative, and very desperate, very angry, a lot of disturbance. And when we are involved and get sucked in, we are then being what we call controlled by this energy. We must learn how to be able to get out of it. By understanding if this is the energy that we are facing, we must then realign ourselves back again to the positive energy, to the happy energy, to the peaceful energy. In other words, always keep your mind well and happy. Be happy, don't worry. So remember, the earth that we are living in is not a stationary earth. We are actually a revolving earth. And when we are revolving, we know that we circle around the sun and our earth moves, rotates, and there is a lot of flow. We also got to learn to live with the flow. So therefore, we have to also learn about the various directions. And that's why sometimes when the Feng Shui talks about directions, it actually meant that we understand the nature of the energy that is flowing. Imagine when you are staying on the in a, what do you call it, in a house facing a junction, right? People say don't buy a house facing a T junction, and they expect Feng Shui. What do you mean by this? Is that when you are staying at the head of a T junction, each time a car comes across the T junction, it is actually pointing at your house and heading for your house. There's an energy flow there all the time. And in your mind, when you're sitting at the living room, there is this inert fear that one day this car may not have brakes, and eventually it's going to charge into your house and create damage, and it might even hurt you. So there is this inert fear and this inert instability. And when you have that fear in your mind all the time, your mind is never peaceful. You cannot sleep. You cannot sleep well. And same thing when you are at the T junction, and as the car approaches your house in the middle of the night, it always have a headlight on because at night you got to have headlights. And the headlight will shine through your windows because you know most of our modern houses, our master bedroom is always in the front. And as it shines into your window, even though you may have curtains, it creates shadows. And it swings from left as it turns left. It swings from right as it turns right. And it keeps on doing this. Do you have peaceful sleep? When you don't have peaceful sleep, you cannot wake up peacefully. When you cannot wake up peacefully, your mind will then have what we call a lot of stress, a lot of anxieties, a lot of sleeplessness. Can you think well? Can you make decisions well? If you cannot make decisions well, then you will not become prosperous. Be fatat. Feng Shui. Understanding that when you have this kind of energy that is flowing, you then realign yourself. Maybe sleep. So that's why now in modern design, because I'm a developer, so I know about housing design now, that we try to put the master bedroom now at the back instead of the front. And the living room at the back instead of the front. The modern houses are now moving in that direction. Partly also because of Feng Shui. And we always face with a lot of difficulties in selling our houses, especially bungalows or villas. And before a person buy, you always bring in the Feng Shui master. Right? And at the same time, they will say, oh, it didn't face the right direction. The living room is not in the right corner. Then we always say, okay, next time before we design the house, we better consult some of these geomancy theories and then put them into place, because that will help to sell the house. Right? So that hopefully answers the first question.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, second question.
Yeah, okay. Due to time constraint, we will just take one final question. So just now, Brother Charlie mentioned that there are currently two Buddhist sects. One concentrate on theory aspect and the other on practice. Can Brother name which sect teaches more on Buddhist theory and which sect on practice? Thanks.
I think many of you would have understood what I was trying to say. Because if you look at the two main sects of Buddhism, we have the Theravada and we have the Mahayana. Now, in Theravada Buddhism, we stress a lot of learning. We stress a lot of what you call intellectual developments. We study all the sutras and we understand all the Abhidhamma, and then we try to understand the workings of the mind and matter, the philosophy and the psychology. But we become academicians. We become what we call secular. And when we have that kind of knowledge, we tend to have a lot of IQ. But look at some of our Buddhist friends who are so well trained, so knowledgeable in the early days. Eventually, they then fall out. Either they develop the difficulties in their life and they couldn't cope with it, or they develop what we call emotional breakdowns. And we always say that at that point in time, you then need to have a lot of compassion, loving kindness, exhibition of it, practice of it, conditioning by it, and also mixing around with people who have that kind of qualities and perfections. When we go into the Mahayana teachings, of course, Mahayana in the early days caters toward the highest philosophy of the Buddha's teachings, the Buddhist texts. And sometimes a lot of people couldn't understand. That's why Mahayana text sometimes is not easy to explain, because it caters for the Brahminical level. Because most of the Mahayana texts were actually derived from writings by high Brahmins who became the Buddha's disciples. And they cater for the two extremes. One is the high philosophical, the other one is just practice. And sometimes even to the extent of just chanting a mantra to calm yourself down. Namo Ami Tofo, Om Mani Padme Hum. And when you calm yourself down with these mental good vibrations, then you practice compassion, you practice charity, you practice service. And by virtue of that, you develop what we call purity of life. And that caters for a lot of EQ, a lot of what we call teachings of the heart. So I was trying to point out the difference between very highly intellectual learnings and the other one is teachings of the heart, which caters for our daily practices. So that actually gives rise to two forms of practice. But we must try to balance these two. You must have IQ and we must have EQ. And sometimes even in the Mahayana groups of societies, they do invite some of the Theravada scholars to go and teach the theory, teach the fundamentals, and understand it very methodically. So we teach karma, we teach rebirth, we teach the Four Noble Truths in a very methodical and intellectual way. But at the same time, we also encourage Mahayana teachers to come to the Theravada groups and the societies and centers to teach a lot on the practice of compassion, practice of loving kindness, and thus pacify and settle the emotions and the heart. So it is good balance. And if we can practice in this balance, I think we will be on the right path. Okay, so with that, thank you very much. And I hope that you have benefited from this morning's session. And let me take this opportunity to wish each and everyone well and happy. May you all be protected and be free from disease. And may you be strong and healthy. Sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much, Datuk Charlie. Okay, so before we end, let us do the dedication and sharing of merits. Okay, let us put our palms together and recite after me. Idam me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang no nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang wo nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Eta wata cha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang. Sabe sata anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Idame punyang asawakaya wahang hotu. Idame punyang nibbanasa pacayo hotu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.